we'd like to do now is we'll call up Dr. Jim House. He's a professor at the University of Manitoba. He has been a really important part, and his team have been an important part of pulling together a sustainable protein research strategy. And that was released in June of 2022. And so what we'd like to do, and what Jim will do, is give you a bit of an overview here, especially related to animal protein research priorities. So Jim, I'll invite you up. Sorry, I went with the short.
Yeah, that's no problem. Thanks, Morris, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me to talk on this, just a bit of an overview of the Manitoba Protein Research Strategy, which was initiated at the behest of Manitoba Agriculture. And so this work is also done in conjunction with my research associate, Dr. Aaron Goldberg. So I'm sure you can all see the fine print on this chart. I put this up here just to emphasize the work that's gone into Project Aspire, and there's lots of examples along the back wall of the different groupings and the different working groups that have come into play here. The group that I'm involved with is the Information and Knowledge Working Group, and this is where the Manitoba Protein Research Strategy lines up. And it's probably easier to see on this diagram. And again, all of these materials are available on the province's website, and you can also link to it through the make.ca website that's available through the Faculty of Agricultural and Food Sciences. But essentially what Project Aspire is doing is accelerating sustainable protein impact and results. And those 10 pillars that form that Project Aspire hub includes one of the hubs around the information and knowledge, which is where the Manitoba Research Strategy, Protein Research Strategy comes into play. And what this group was tasked to do was really to look at identifying research gaps as it relates to sustainable protein research within the province. And so we entered into a process whereby we defined a sustainability framework. And for that framework, essentially we were using the FAO 2019 Healthy Dietary Guidelines framework, which defines sustainability around 4 dimensions, and I'll talk about those in just a second. We surveyed the Manitoba ecosystem with respect to infrastructure and expertise. Again, the focus on this was research. And so we were looking at developing our knowledge about what we have in terms of our capacity within the province as it relates to all proteins, all food proteins. And then defining that, the infrastructure and expertise. We then conducted a research gap analysis, and this was a very extensive...
Sorry, I've got to interrupt you just for a second, and I'm very sorry to do that. Somebody's boxed in a car.
Oh,
and
okay.
They need to leave, and it's a Manitoba plate B14214. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
okay.
It's one of those things. Someone's got to leave.
Absolutely. B14214. I'll play bingo. Okay. It's a white Lexus. If there's anybody with a white Lexus, would you please make your way to the door? So thank you. And essentially what we're looking at doing is identifying the research gaps and then identifying priority research areas to inform the province in terms of setting research priorities as it relates to the next initiative, which is the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership Program, or SCAP, or SCAP, which is will be forming the next 5-year framework between the federal and provincial and territory partnerships around funding. These are the 4 dimensions of sustainable protein that I wanted to highlight as was positioned within that FAO document. Essentially, we've been talking a lot about this today around environmental sustainability, but we have to keep in mind that of the 4 dimensions, we need to keep in perspective economic sustainability, sociocultural elements of sustainability, as well as health-related aspects. And it's often termed that health-related component that tends not to get considered within discussions around sustainability, but it does form an important part of the framework that we're discussing today. And I think Bruce mentioned some of those elements today in his presentation. And you can see there some of the elements that go into each of those. And so Obviously, climate change and climate change mitigation features heavily within our understanding of these dimensions. And so when we looked at the sustainability and did an environmental scan of who was working in Manitoba and the research capacity within the province, we identified across the entire food system capacity. And you can see here, again, this document's available through the Manitoba Agriculture's website. But expertise from primary production all the way through to end usage, and identifying the capacity and opportunities that exist within each of those buckets of capacity. And then you have overarching elements, including water and waste management, digital agriculture and food systems, and looking at enhanced efficiency and collaboration between industry, academia, in terms of ongoing and future support. Now, once we had that framework in place, we then conducted another series of surveys and workshops to define the research gaps. And what came out of this work was really identification of 4 priority areas: climate resiliency, development and processing, digital agriculture, and wastewater and co-product and byproduct utilization. And so this is not meant to diminish any of the other components, but this is where the group felt that priority should be given in terms of the research gap analysis. And as part of this process, we then identified 47 research gaps, and they're listed within those 4 frameworks. And what I've done on the next couple of slides is pulled out a few of the examples around animal agriculture, just to highlight some of the thinking that went into developing these research priorities. So for example, climate resiliency, looking at crop and livestock adaptation to extreme weather events and targeted breeding for climate stressors. Focus on circular bioeconomy. I think that's really been at the forefront of discussions today, looking at the interface between livestock and plant protein sectors. It's not either or. The sectors need to work together, and we heard a really good case example of that from Marquette today, about how working with the livestock sector is critical to the success of the plant protein sector. So it's something that we need to keep in mind when we're talking about sustainable protein for the province. You have examples under the product development and processing, such as removal of undesirable flavors from animal feed. Looking at some other examples in digital agriculture, looking at precision livestock farming, applied demonstration of feed efficiency in commercial herds, translating digital information into actionable management for producers, and then again in the wastewater byproduct and co-product utilization, some other examples, including relationship between feed and manure composition for further utilization. So really this is just some examples of the research gaps that were identified that were used to inform opportunities moving forward for researchers. And that was part of the goal of the Manitoba Protein Research Strategy, was to identify these research gaps. But we had other goals. We wanted to ensure that there was an opportunity to make linkages and provide new opportunities for collaboration across the ecosystem. And so to that end, we introduced a knowledge database. And it's today you're going to see what's called the Canadian Agri-Food Asset Database, or CAFA. It's a network of expertise in infrastructure and sustainable protein research. This is being done in partnership with Emily, or the Enterprise Machine Learning Initiative. It's basically a geospatial data view where you can see all the protein network assets plotted on an interactive map. What we are working towards, and we are literally just moving to new servers as we speak, and so we'll be rolling this out in the new year, but I'm going to show you the beta version of it now to give you some example of the functionality. But essentially what it does is provide an overview of the research ecosystem, infrastructure, and expertise that exists as it relates to protein. So our initial data gathering happened during the research strategy, focused primarily on Manitoba. But through funding that we've received from Protein Industries Canada, we're expanding that to beyond Manitoba. And so that's the introduction of the Canadian Agri-Food Asset Map. So I'm just going to quit out of here. And hopefully this works. Just a sec. Of course, I didn't bring my glasses up with me. That would help. Here we go. Where did it go? So this is CAFA. It's modeled after the Oceans Clusters database, which is another initiative that was funded through the Supercluster initiative from ICED. And so we've used geospatial technology, and so we've introduced those that the original population through our database, identified a number of individuals that were working in the area of protein research. And so this is a searchable database. I can go on here, and I'm only going to go to ones that, if I do something, PDCAS. So that's protein digestibly corrected amino acid score, in case you're interested. So it's an area that I do work in, and so my name pops up if you type that in. And if you click on, you can actually go onto the map, and you can see who's doing work in this area. It actually shows you the location, the address. You can actually click on the individual's name and get more detail if you go down to, this would be a lot easier if I had my glasses. Business type, talks about keywords. And so this is the area where we're putting in the information about the research and the research opportunities that exist. And so this is a living document. We are going to be allowing companies to self-populate their information. You'll need to claim a login ID, and then you can add your information, researchers, those that are conducting research, and we see an opportunity to expand that. This is really going to be a tool that the community, the ecosystem can use to make connections, and that's really what we're hoping to see with this. So I'm going to just quickly go back to the So just last slide is some of the key outcomes to date. So we've identified the key research gaps and priorities for Manitoba. And again, this will also be a living document. There's going to be opportunities to reassess this, and that's where I see the opportunities for the working group and information and knowledge to really continue to identify and reevaluate those gaps and priorities so that we can do some additional strategic planning around the research opportunities. We established the Canadian Agri-Food Asset Map, or database, which is an online searchable information about research infrastructure and expertise. We also established the Manitoba Sustainable Protein Research Symposium. And so for the last 2 years, it's been running virtually, but did include an in-person networking opportunity. And so I think a number of you attended that this year. Was at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. So this was the first time that many of our graduate students had an opportunity to actually see people in person. Imagine going your entire graduate career, or even your undergraduate career for a lot of the students, and not actually having an opportunity to network. This is a major challenge that we need to overcome. And so to that end, we're going to see more networking opportunities that are going to be spearheaded out of the university to ensure that we're providing our trainees and our students an opportunity to connect with the sector. And we're also established the Nexus for Knowledge Translation. Part of that, as was mentioned by the minister this morning, was the establishment of a protein research chair at the University of Manitoba. And that will be an opportunity for that chair position to serve as a focal point or a nexus to bring in expertise, to bring in collaborations and foster those collaborations across the ecosystem. So with that, Morris, I'm happy to finish up and turn it, and hopefully I've kept us more or less on time. Bang on, thank you. I talk really fast.
I'm just going to grab the mic.
Sure.
Take it down. Thank you very much, Jim. And please do check out the work that has been done on the strategy, but also on the mapping and the interactive mapping. I think it's fantastic.